So let me start with an apology. Last week in my sermon, I talked about Peter rebuking Jesus and then Jesus rebuking Peter. It wasn't until Monday when I was working on this week's sermon that I noticed that the whole rebuking scene wasn't even in last week's gospel lesson. It's in this week's. And none of you noticed. And for that I have to say, bless you. Now, I know some of you are probably going, what's he talking about? It's not in the bulletin. I know if it's not in the bulletin, it doesn't count, right? But thank you for going along. And thank you all for not texting, angry text saying that wasn't in the bulletin, preacher. So we've got that all cleared up. So we get to this week's gospel, which does have the rebuking, and I wanted to keep that scene in because of what Jesus says after rebuking Peter and Satan. Last week, the question that Jesus asked was, "Who do you say I am?" This week, the question Jesus asks is, "Who will I say you are?" Who will I say you are? There are a number of titles that describe me. I am a father, I am a son, I am a brother, I am a pastor, an uncle, brother-in-law, a friend. During my recent time away, I gained 2 new titles. My niece had a baby Kennedy, so that makes me a great uncle, which I love that name, great uncle. But the other title was that I am now a pickleball player. That's right. I started playing while on vacation, and I fell in love with it. In fact, I brought a paddle just in case a pickleball game started, and I was ready. You just never know. You always keep one in the trunk as you're driving around. You just never know when you see pickleball players around. I started the first week we were on vacation, and the second day I was playing, one of the players on the other team made a really nice shot, and when I congratulated her, she said, "Well, I did go to church last Sunday." And I said, "Lady, have I got news for you." It was one of those times I wish I had a clerical just to stick on my t-shirt, but let's just say it was game on after that. But each of those titles I have been given come with a responsibility. I am not a father unless I act like one. I am not a friend unless I act like one. You get the idea. So over time, we all add names or titles to our identities. But sooner or later, we have to act in order to validate those titles. There is one title that all of us here and all of us worshiping online share, and that title is follower of Jesus. But we cannot be followers of Jesus unless we act like followers. But to act like true followers, there are some expectations we need to let go of. Now, one of the expectations we need to let go of is that being a follower of God means that everything in life is just going to be great. What we need to accept is that at times the life of a believer is going to get bumpy. Please take a look at that first lesson. The prophet Jeremiah is experiencing rejection and isolation from the very people from whom God has called him to preach. And because of that hurt, Jeremiah feels hurt by God. He begs God to show up and help out. It is the classic, "God, I am doing what you called me to do, and now I'm hurt, and I don't know where you are." Sound familiar? Finding God in the middle of suffering is a difficult feat. Recently, I visited someone in the hospital, and she and her spouse were struggling with that. They were trying to find God in the middle of their suffering. And as we talked, we started to see and hear where God was speaking. God was speaking through the doctors and the nurses. through the visits that were being made by family and friends. There was not a moment where that patient was ever alone during her stay in the hospital. That was God working. And that is what Jeremiah is looking for, that voice, that moment, that sign that God had not left Jeremiah to suffer alone. And so God promises Jeremiah that Jeremiah will be saved and delivered from the people's abuse. God tells Jeremiah in our lesson, I will make you a sturdy bronze wall against these people. This repeats what God said in chapter 1. Back in chapter 1, God says, today I have made you an armed city, an iron pillar, and a bronze wall against the entire land, the kings of Judah, its princes, its priests, and all its people. They will attack you, but they won't defeat you, because I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. And so back to our reading, it is God who once again promising, they will attack you, but they won't triumph because I am with you. To protect and rescue you, I will rescue you from the hand of the wicked, and I will redeem you from the grasp of the violent. Jeremiah does not suffer alone. God is with him. But God does more than see Jeremiah through. God rescues and redeems. Theologian John Goldingay writes that Jeremiah only uses redeem, that word redeem here and in chapter 31. In both passages, Jeremiah uses it to talk about being liberated from a kind of captivity. So God is going to set Jeremiah free. We cannot expect life to be easygoing. There are stumbling blocks and there are traps that await us. Maybe some of you are in those traps this morning. But we can expect God to free us from those traps and to offer grace and redemption always. Another expectation we need to let go of. We need to let go of the expectation that in order to make ourselves look good before God, that we need to make others look bad. There is a parable that Jesus tells in Luke of a Pharisee that, quote, stood and prayed about himself with these words, God, I thank you that I'm not like everyone else, crooks, evildoers, adulterers, even like this tax collector. Or it's like making the statement, I am the most humble person I know. In our psalm, in order to look good before God, the psalmist says, I don't have anything to do with the wicked, the evildoers, the hypocrites. But the one that gets me is in verse 4. I do not sit down with the worthless. The worthless. Now, in doing some research, I did learn that the actual Hebrew points to the ones who chose to focus on emptiness or chose on worthless things. Unfortunately, our version, the NRSV, this worthless version, makes it sound more like a title rather than what people choose to do. But I wanted to keep it in there to see if you can notice how it was used. There is nothing sadder than when we Christians consider someone worthless. It can be based on race, age, sexual orientation, class, financial reasons, social status, political. And some people can say that doesn't happen, Pastor, but I will tell you it does. I have heard Christians call all police evil. I have heard Christians call children, especially children with any kind of learning disabilities, a nuisance and an embarrassment. I have heard Christians call homeless people dirty and lazy and worthless. I have heard Christians call people of different political parties and different sexual identities abominations. Sadly, it happens far too often. Far too often. So my question is, when did Jesus ever call someone worthless? When did Jesus ever call someone worthless? I'm waiting. Here is another expectation. This is something that we need to accept. Love, forgive, and mean it. As Paul writes, love should be shown without pretending. And you know, the best way to do that is to really put your heart into it. Really mean it when you say, I love you, or show somebody a kind act. When you give somebody something, make sure you don't say, you know, I had to give that to you. Because then it's all about you, isn't it? Or if you are a wonderful giver to the church, I don't mean like financially, but of your time or your time and your talents. But then if we say thanks to someone else, and if you come and say, hey, why haven't I been recognized? You've probably answered your own question. So you've got to really put your heart into it. Really mean it when you say, I love you. Really put your heart into it when you say, please forgive me. Or when you forgive someone else. You see, forgiveness for you, forgiveness for me, forgiveness comes from God. A true act of love. A few years ago, actually it's been a little bit longer than that now, I had someone I was very close to do something that really hurt me. And I was hurt and I was angry. And I held on to that hurt and I held on to that anger. Now, I didn't see this person for a number of years. And then when I knew I was going to be at the same place at the same time with this person, I was starting to stress out because I did not know how to act around that person. And while I was thinking and praying, I started to ask myself why I was holding on to this anger. What good was it doing? What was it making me a better person? And that moment made me realize, what is the point of holding on to the anger? Because the more you hold on to hate in your heart, it leaves a little less room for Jesus. And it leaves a little room for Satan to do his dirty work. Forgive, love. As Paul says, don't be defeated by evil, but defeat evil with good. And if you really want to upset the devil, remember that there are good and bad days and that God is there no matter what day it is. And remember that everyone has worth and that you do not have to knock someone down in order to win favor with God, because you've already won God's favor and you're not going to lose it. Remember to forgive and love with your heart, with sincerity, even when you have been wronged. And remember that to be a follower of Jesus, you actually have to follow. As Jesus told his disciples, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Follow Jesus. Don't talk about it. Don't shout about it. Just do it. Amen.